have this kind of a showing after a Tuesday where it was a knockdown, drag-out political season, I tell you, I'm impressed. You Granite Staters know the serious business of which you are part of here. So thank you for that. Thanks for the invitation. I really am honored to be here. I feel a little bit, I know some of you here are probably here maybe a little against your will. And it reminds me when I was a young FBI agent in Chicago. I was working organized crime, and there was a gentleman there named Johnny Apes Monteleone. And Johnny Apes was a crew boss, and he got his nickname because he would go crazy and beat up some of his own crew members if they did something wrong. I mean, he just would lose it. And so I had an informant one day tell me, hey, Johnny Apes was having a meeting on a Sunday in the garage and went after somebody pretty hard. And the guy didn't fare all that well. And so I thought, well, hey, this is my chance. I happened to see him walking down the street. It was like a bad movie, with cannolis, with his finger out, carrying a little box of cannolis down the street. This guy's probably killed 25 people in his life. Pretty bad guy. And so I thought, as a 26-year-old FBI agent, this is my chance. I'm going to recruit one of the crew bosses, and he's going to come work for the FBI. We're going to decimate organized crime in Chicago, right? Who wouldn't want to cooperate with me? So I get there, and I'm working my, getting my pattern going with him, and he's very patient, and he's listening to me. And I said, you know, Johnny, you keep beating your crew members like this. One of them is going to want to talk to me. So why don't you talk to me first, right? I'm going to go find the guy. Somebody's going to talk. I mean, their morale, I hear, is low. And this is Johnny Apes says, well, let me tell you something. Nothing like a good beating to keep the family together. So we call that forced family fun in our family. I know some of you are feeling this a little bit. You're like, okay, I got to be here, and I got to have a good time, and I'll be polite. So thank you for all of that. I thought I'd talk a minute, and we can take, hopefully have a few minutes for questions, because I think it's going to be really important. Why we're here, this is my wife, Christy Rogers, by the way. Also, yeah, she's a serial entrepreneur, served in Iraq with the Department of Defense for a year, really accomplished on her own right, and so she's decided to join us today. And we started this organization called LEAD, Leadership to Ensure the American Dream, because we were worried about the tenor and tone of politics, and the fact that there is whole swaths of Americans who are forgetting about what an amazing place America is, candidly on both sides of the spectrum. And so we said, could we create an organization where we could go out where it mattered and change the narrative and offer positive solutions for the way forward. And that's really how this all got started for us. And we ended up and realized, by the way, if you're going to do this, if you're going to try to change the narrative, you're going to get in a conversation. Places you have to go are places like New Hampshire. You're just punched way above your weight here. And you play such a critical, important role in the future of American politics. Same with Iowa, and same with South Carolina. We've had a great privilege to be in those places as well. We're from Michigan, an important, obviously an important state that didn't go the way I wanted it to go this last go-round on Tuesday. But what we found in all of that was this really almost political discouragement. People are discouraged. They're exhausted. They're tired of that extreme partisan bickering on both sides of the aisle. It's been interesting to have these conversations. And people started saying, my gosh, we're dealing with issues that we've been talking about for 50 years. Right? I think the last time we even dealt with, when I heard President Obama running around the country saying they're going to steal your Social Security and take your Medicare. Right? That has happened in every election for the last 50 years. It's incredible. You just go back and look at all of it. It's unbelievable. It's the same trick on the same, and I think people are getting it, right? I know the younger folks are saying, my God, haven't we heard this before? Why is nothing changing? And what worries me most, and worries Christy and I, and why we got into this, is because we're a little bit worried that people are either A, disengaging from the political process, or B, starting to think it doesn't matter. And that presents its own unique set of problems for the United States. We have major, major challenges that we have to face. And by the way, we can do this. This still is the greatest country on earth. The reason we haven't been able to be successful at tackling these big issues is because we're in two different boats rowing in two different directions. I saw a really interesting poll recently that said 62% of Democrats think that Republicans are immoral. 72% of Republicans think Democrats are immoral. Right? Tell me how we both forge a coalition to actually solve big, serious problems. It gets more and more difficult. And you see the election like you just saw on Tuesday. And that was an election based on people rejecting all kinds of things, and everybody's gonna put their own stamp on it for whatever their own gain is for their party. But you can tell people are a little bit nervous. They know something isn't right. And so many people decide that they feel that something is different, that this idea of America may be slipping away from them and their children. You can feel it. You all know it. You're all engaged in politics to one degree or another. You've had those conversations. How many Thanksgiving dinners in the last few years have been ruined over political dialogue in a way that used to never happen? Right? That tension, that partisanship, that sharp edge is starting to take a toll. And our kids have been told over and over, America is kind of losing its mojo. We're going a different way. You know, maybe you don't have to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance or when the flag goes by at the parade. You know, that's okay. Matter of fact, that's not even cool anymore. You start hearing all of those messages for all of that time, and people are starting to actually believe that maybe the best days of America has come and gone. I passionately reject that. I know you all do, or you wouldn't be here. And the fact that we have an opportunity to get this right is pretty exciting to me. And I argue this is the time to get it right. And why I think this cycle and this message is going to be so important is we don't have another election cycle to just throw away and say, maybe we'll get it right the next time. I'm going to tell you why here in a minute. When you think about really what's happened in the last few years from our government, that's really put us in a very weak position to compete against our strategic competitors, namely China. And I want to talk about that in a minute. $3 trillion, every penny of it, in the last 2 years, $3 trillion, we had to borrow. Which means these young folks in the room are going to have to figure out how to pay this money back before they do anything good. The interest payment on that $3 trillion plus the debt that we have, which is now 31 trillion, is going to be larger than the entire Defense Department budget. Think of that. Just the interest payment. That doesn't go to buying one soldier, one tank, one law enforcement officer. Doesn't go for a Social Security check. None of that. It goes to interest on the debt. And by the way, we borrow that money from countries like, well, China and Japan and others. Saudi Arabia invests in us as well. And you think about all the things that went wrong with just that spending. I mean, and here we are. So the government has grown pretty significantly in the last decade, I hate to say. And in that, now, as of last year, it takes 8 tax-paying Americans to pay for 1 federal employee that works inside the Beltway. Think of that. There's 8 people here, even the young folks here. There's probably 6 or 7 of you here. Think of that, 8 to pay for 1 federal employee. Do you think our government is in the right shape or condition to be able to justify 8 people paying for 1 person's salary? I don't think so. So think about this notion that we've just kind of abandoned the notion that the federal government has to be small, has to be effective, it has to be efficient. Well, right now we're dealing with 21st century problems. China is on the rise. We need to understand that. And they are doing it by hook or by crook. They're taking their nicks at us along the way. So we have 21st century problems. We have a 19th century designed government with 20th century solutions. And we wonder why we don't feel like we're getting ahead. Imagine if we had that small, efficient government that worked well. In that COVID spending, just that COVID spending, and with a report that came out from the Pentagon on lost money, $750 billion in the last few years was either lost or stolen from the federal government payment system. They're paying people who were dead. They had international criminal gangs come in, and almost half of the money stolen in COVID payments were stolen by international players. And you have to scratch your head. You think, God, why can't the government do this, right? I'm in the tech side. I did my politics. I rose to chairman. It was the most, I was the biggest honor of my life being chairman of the intelligence community, 17 agencies. We did some really great things in the war on terror. And you think about now, this government can't find out that we're sending checks to dead people. Walmart can tell you today, if you went and bought a roll of toilet paper here in Manchester, they'll know immediately by their system, so they know when to order more toilet paper. We can't figure out how to keep track of $750 billion. It's because our government isn't designed to do it. We never modernized our government. We just keep throwing more money at it and more people at it and hope for the best. That's not sustainable. It's just not sustainable. We can't continue to do this. If you think about where China wants to be and why, to me, this is so critically important. our politics today is how do I divide, how do we conquer, how do we spend a lot of time telling each other how we're different, where we're from, or what we look like, or where we come from, or what you believe, what church you go to, or mosque, or synagogue, right? We spend a lot of time, and the government tries to help you do that. They collect all that information and remind us how we're different every day. We don't spend a lot of time reminding all of us why we are the same, why we live in this most amazing place that allows Jews and Christians and Muslims to live on the same street and have the same opportunity to go to school or university or business. We don't talk about that. We stopped talking about it. And what happened when we stopped talking about it? America started to crumble around the edges. Our ports, bridges, and transportation modals like airports and other things are now ranked 50th in the world. Look how much money we spend. How many election cycles have we said we're the ones that are going to fix infrastructure in the United States? How many? 50. This is the United States of America. The dumbest thing is we have the money. Maybe we're just not spending it exactly right. And maybe the size and scope of the government isn't efficient enough, hasn't been modernized, right? My wife was telling me a great story. She was working with someone in the Commerce Department. She does a lot of work on supply chain and trying to get this right so we are more aligned with competing with China. And she said, they created when they got the CHIPS money, the government did what the government does. They created 2 new departments in commerce to spend the money that they were appropriated by Congress. So they're going to hire a whole bunch of federal employees who probably don't have the right experience set to do this. And they said, oh, well, can we help you go faster? You guys need to go faster. I almost fell out of my chair. I almost thought she wasn't telling the truth. She said, I said, well, what did they ask for? She said, a fax machine. I'm not kidding. I looked at that and I said, my God, we've got problems, right? I mean, does anyone even use a fax machine anymore? I mean, they just did not have a concept of how fast this is moving. And the reason we have the chips bill and we're worried about it is because China is trying to corner the market on chips. And we need chips in almost everything we use, right? So they start turning that switch off, we're gonna have huge economic problems. So think about where they're going. And here's what they want to do, and this is why you can't come in second place with what China. And China has publicly said they want the United States off the world stage. They don't think that we should be influencing both commerce and other and freedom discussions around the world. They say that openly. Matter of fact, you know how they say they're going to beat us? Because we are weak and self-absorbed. Interesting, right? Those are harsh words. Those are American words. Those are the Chinese Communist Party telling us how they're going to beat us, right? Here's the good news, you challenge a good American any day of the week, look at, right? You unleash Americans' innovation, you get the government out of the way, we get government controlled, we can win this particular fight. But here's the thing that they did recently that tells me they've stepped up their game. They have these things in the intelligence business that are information operations. We watched the Russians do this. They were trying to pit white nationalists against black activist groups and try to get them to show up at the same place. Yeah, thank you, Vladimir Putin, right? And we know that they did it, lots of data on this. Well, the Chinese decided to get in on the game, and here was their message, very different. Their message was, don't go vote. Your vote won't count. Don't participate in elections, right? Does that sound like a friend to you? So the Communist Party is taking that, and what they're doing is basically taking that information that they glean out of that, going around the world and say, America, democracy is broken, and her best days are behind her. Participate with us. They built a bridge in an African country, beautiful bridge. And what the Africans were saying is, why doesn't the United States come? And the Chinese say, listen, you see that bridge? Was that built by freedom and democracy? Was it built by America? Or was it built by the Communist Party of China? And you know how much that bridge cost that particular country? Nothing, right? So they're playing this long game of investment in places that we need to be. And why do they want to be there? Natural resources. So we have one critical mineral plant that has been waiting for approval to get not a plant, a mine, in the United States. They've been waiting about 20 years to get approved. 20 years. They have 60 plus permits they have to go through. You know how many China has? 1. You know how many Germany has? 1. Where's the most environmentally friendly place you'll extract minerals and natural resources from the earth? The United States of America. we don't get out of our way, China's going to really hurt us. So you think about that, why our policies aren't aligned. Somebody just comes out and says, hey, we think everybody should drive an electric car. Okay, doesn't work if you're in the UP in Michigan, by the way, in February, not so good. But okay, well, you know, we're all willing to do our part. Here's the problem. 85% of what's processed for that electric car happens in China, right? If you're trying to put us on equal competitive footing, you're going exactly the wrong way. We have to align all of these policies. So when you say don't drill, don't mine, none of that can happen here, but we're very willing to buy it somewhere else. You put America and this next generation at a huge disadvantage for what the economy is going to look like. Here's where China is moving out, and I want to stop here pretty quick because I want to make sure we have enough time for questions. They've decided they're going to beat us on all fronts. They tell us they're going to beat us. About 20 years ago, they said they want to build a Navy that beats the Blue Water Navy of the United States. It's the biggest power we have, most deployed. We're very proud our son graduated from the Naval Academy in 2019, served his country out in the Navy, and all of his classmates, we know them all. They're on submarines and carriers, and they're doing great work on behalf of the United States of America. The Chinese just this year, now they told us 20 years ago, this year they just surpassed the size of the United States Navy. They told us they want to compete. They've been working at competing, and what have we been doing politically at home? I don't like my neighbor, I hate my neighbor, I want to shoot my neighbor, I want to beat up my neighbor, I want to throw cans at my neighbor, right? We have completely gone the wrong way. And guess who's helping fan those things? Our adversaries. And China is getting in the game of saying, yes, please, I love it when you guys are committing suicide. Can I get you the rope? Right? They'll probably sell us the rope too. Maybe you can give it to us for free. They have decided they're moving out, and they want to take it. So we are the reserve currency of the world. Most people don't realize what that means for our economic prowess around the world. Not here at home, our standard of living, the cars you buy, the computers you buy, the things you can buy for your home, all are related to our ability to have this robust economy. And there's a reason that people invest in American currency, because they know they can trust it. We always pay it back. We're honorable, we're decent, we live by these rules that are really important to live in international commerce. Chinese don't. They want to take that away from us, and they're working very hard to do it. So if they win and we come in second, guess what? They're going to determine who is the reserve currency for the world. They also say that, listen, on things of technology, we want to be able to set the standards. For software development and technology, they want to be technology dominant by 2035. They want to control the standards. Which means you don't get the choices you get today. You like Apple, yeah? You like Android, whatever you like, guess what? You don't get to choose that in just a few short years. The Chinese will tell you what you get to buy, right? They're working toward this. And again, the reason I get fired up about this, and I'm passionate, again, I used to be an FBI guy, served in the Army, and we believe in public service. My wife served, our kids both served, my daughter served in AmeriCorps, our son is in the Navy. Both of our fathers are Air Force guys, and they pick on me incessantly about my Army choice. I try to give this back as much as I can. But you think about, we're just so passionate about this country and who we are and what we can accomplish, and I still believe we can. But you know, when we believed in the past that we had a foe, we stood up, right? Think about what we did in World War II. Nobody in the world would believe that we could have accomplished that in World War II. We sent kids from farms who hadn't been a mile away from their house. We packed them on trains and sent them east and west, and they went and conquered fascism on one end, imperialism on the other, and we did that. It was an amazing feat. By the way, the American economy rose up to you go from building trucks to B-17s in a place called Ypsilanti, Michigan, in about 8 months. Unbelievable accomplishment, right? And that's how we beat the Germans. That's how we beat the Japanese. And you think about that, amazing. We've solved freedom for a whole bunch of people. We stared down the evil empire that actually was responsible for killing 100 million people during its regime's reign. Think of that, 100 million people. And by the way, a big part of that is when Stalin starved a place called Ukraine. Literally starved. He was actually committing an act of genocide by trying to kill Ukrainians as fast as he could stack them up. They believe in history is more recent than we do, and now you see what Putin's doing in Ukraine. I mean, you think about the challenges to freedom around the world and why we should care. To me, that's one of the most perfect examples of that. So you think about all of those things. and where we have to go in the country. And then you think about the things that we can do. So China is teaching their kids in 8th grade quantum mechanics. This is the most disturbing statistic I'm going to give you all day. Right? So they're data dominant. They're trying to push international standards. They have built up their navy. They've deployed troops to the Middle East. Haven't seen that before. Now they're deploying troops to Africa. They're on the move. They're teaching quantum mechanics in the 8th grade. Half, think of this number, half of high school seniors will graduate and cannot read past the 6th grade level. Half. Think about that. Let that sink in for a minute. Now there's great reclamation programs. We're involved in one called Beyond Basics in Michigan, and it's a not-for-profit, try to get people to catch back up. We're graduating kids. Now, guess what happens? You don't have a lot of career choices if you can't read at the 6th grade level. So you end up in prison, and just a huge number of very low achieving readers in prison. Or, what do? You're pretty low end jobs, it's hard to get a career choice. And what's crazy about this, if we ever decided to focus on this as a country and say we're gonna fix it, and damn it, we're not coming in second, we can do it. This program goes in, it teaches, and it's through a kind of a volunteer, nonprofit status. In 14 weeks, they can get somebody to read at grade level. And by the way, I'm gonna give you the secret sauce. Called phonics. Remember when we went to Whole Word? There's a whole generation of kids that can't read through phonics, and it's dangerous, and it's not working, obviously, right? We can fix it. Imagine if we had this whole group of Americans who decided service was more important, and we were going to be able to compete with this great strategic advisor. And by the way, if you want to get a little money back on your college, go volunteer at the Reading Corps. Take 10 kids and get them reading at grade level. And then we'll all be glad to help you with your student loans. I'm not big on anything for free. I don't know. I had to pay for mine. I don't know about you guys, but I put in a chit to the president and asked if I could get my money back as well. But apparently, that memo didn't go over well with the Biden administration. So you think about these challenges and how we can do it. It's all right there, and it's close. And then there are small things we can do. There's a guy in South Carolina, Charleston, South Carolina, who decided that there's this whole group of kids, economically underprivileged, or just didn't seem like they had a lot of help at home, trying to get them to how to be good young men. So he started something called the Gentleman's Club. Now, it's not what you're thinking. What he did is he wanted to teach these kids manners, how to shake your hand, how to look you in the eye. And he went out in the community, he got people to donate ties and jackets, and nice pair of slacks and some dress shoes. And he said, hey, listen, what I was teaching these kids is that if you look good and you feel good, you're gonna do good. Pretty powerful. And he said the other part of this program, it turns outrageously successful, gave them confidence in themselves, right? Ever see that poor kid walking down the hall staring at his shoes? He got them to look up, be confident in themselves and their capabilities. And he said, the biggest part of this is when these kids realize that someone actually cares about them, it's unbelievable how they grew, right? We can do this as Americans, and it doesn't have to be a government program to do it. Neither of the ones I just told you about were government programs. We can do this. And I talk about this one last thing, if I can. We met this guy, he's Bulgarian, who we got to know, who loves America. And he's been a citizen for about 13 years, and loves America. And he said, I go back twice a year to Bulgaria. And I said, really, you see family? He goes, yeah, I see family. He said, but I just want to talk to my friends. He said, you know why I go back? Because when I come back here, I hear so much about how bad America is. I go there to realize how wrong they are to talk bad about the greatest nation on the face of the earth. He goes, I got to go twice a year. I used to only have to do it once. Now I got to go twice. We're doing this to ourselves is the worst part of it. So imagine a country that gets our kids back reading again at 12th grade level. What does that do to our economy? I think the numbers we saw was over $1 trillion. I mean, it's huge because now they're performing, their skill sets go up, they can do other jobs they couldn't do before. Imagine if we get a government that's actually smaller, more efficient, doesn't cost as much, and less intrusive in your life because we marry technology to the problem set. Right? We don't need 2 million people working for the federal government. No other institution in the country survives at that big. It's because we keep growing it, throwing programs at it and money at it, and it doesn't work. We ought to have the courage to stand up and say, if you want your government to work again, we have to reshape it and make it and change it to work for you. All of these things are possible, but the most important thing is we cannot stop believing in who we are. America has always been bigger than her problems, always. Doesn't mean we don't have them. It doesn't mean that we haven't gone through periods of our history that weren't that great, that none of us would be proud of. But you think about how people get over that, think of this. There's a guy named Eric Shinseki. When he was born an enemy of the state. Right? The Japanese had just attacked Pearl Harbor. Right? We interned Japanese citizens. Really a black mark on our history. You can understand people were afraid, they didn't understand, this was not the right thing to do. He was born, he was an enemy of the state of the United States. He rose up, he didn't let that get at him. He rose up, he became the highest ranking Army officer in the United States Army. He was the Chief of Staff of the Army, actually in the 2000s, you probably heard his name. His name was General Shinseki, you might remember that name from the War on Terror, right? And if you hear him talk, you'll get a tear in your eye. He's like this, nobody should feel like they started out worse than a guy like me. But anything is possible here. We just can't stop believing that anything is possible. I know I do, and I know it's worth fighting for. And I know that you all drag yourselves out of a very tiring event called the Tuesday election and believe it too. So I want to say, hey, thank you. Thanks for giving me a minute. I look forward to any questions and hopefully meeting you again soon in the future. Thanks, everybody. Yes, sir.
I gather Michigan did a nice thing yesterday and elected a former Marine as a Republican congressman.
John James.
Oh, John James?
Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful guy.
Good.
Yeah, wonderful guy. Yeah, is this his third go around?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was his third go around.
Right.
Great guy. He's going to be a great addition to Congress.
Glad to hear that. I have a question for you. I read this article in Der Spiegel about a week ago, which focused on China setting up these sub-rosa TO&E police stations in Ireland, the UK, Germany, and one other country, and then there were rumors that they may have done the same thing or trying to do the same thing in the US and Canada. Do you have any?
I do. And so we call them police stations, that they wouldn't by definition be a police station, but what they are is full of Chinese nationalists who basically are going to harass people to do things that they don't want to do, and that's why they came to free countries like you described. And it happens here in the United States in different ways. In the United States, again, our big government, 19th century government, we don't talk to each other very well in all the different homeland security and all that. We like to think it's all happening at a high end. Sometimes it's just not. And so, well, great example. Last night, Christy and I, and we support this group, it's called the Atheni Group. It's a Republican and a Democrat college student head, right? They had the college Republicans for their campuses, got together and decided these Confucius Institutes, which were the prelude to these police station Chinese institutes. And what they were doing is spreading hate and discontent on campus and trying to promote the Chinese Communist Party ideals and values, and that's exactly what they had no other purpose other than that. And they were investing, the Chinese Communist Party was investing in research happening at these universities, and they only asked for one thing, that our guys get close to the research. And you know what was happening. They were stealing it like crazy. And so how I think we beat these things, this is fantastic. This is the America I grew up in. These two kids, they're not really kids, they're young men, got together. They realized as a Republican and a Democrat, they needed to come together on this important issue and go to the college. How many colleges are they up to? 23 colleges. They've been able to get Confucius Institutes kicked out. And more importantly, they're getting these colleges to understand why taking Chinese Communist Party money is unhealthy to the safety and security of the United States, both economically and our national security. And they've gotten, I think it's 6 of those. 6 of those, 6 colleges finally went, okay, we'll stop taking that money. Here's the bad part. How many universities and colleges are out there still taking the money? A lot. And so we're going to have to do this. The government can't do it all, You know, I told these two young men yesterday that they picked up their flintlock and marched to the front line, right? You know, we're gonna take on the greatest army in the world in you know, a couple hundred years ago. And we did it for the sheer determination of people thought something was worth fighting for. So they're doing a phenomenal job. It's called Athena if you wanna go online. It's a very worthy cause. Go down here and then Representative.
So I thought that was a great talk. I'm John Mallory, longtime MIT scientist. And if I might, can I give you a couple reasons why?
Yeah, I love it. As long as they're not too negative.
Number one reason is what we're missing is leadership.
Mm.
Too many politicians are just following what the pollsters tell them, and that's followership, not leadership. Number two, we have money buys elections, and I just sent Neil, wherever he is, a paper on this, which is coming right out with the equations, which means a special interest with a local interest, for example, like a manufacturing plant in China, want to make sure nothing, you know, irritates a party. So the leadership has to sort of go beyond that general interest. So that's the number one point. Number 2 point is the Chinese have been cheating in international trade forever, basically. The NIE for cyber espionage a few years back estimated $3 trillion in dollars stolen from the U.S. since 1981, the Chinese alone. A lot of those are big weapon systems. So we need an industrial policy to counter that aggressive activity and to make up for any deficits. You hit that point. And then if you look at the Chinese, they graduate 5 million kids a year from university, and we maybe graduate about 1 million. And we have 1/5 the population. So if we want to stay ahead or compete, we need to optimize our human capital. And that means, right where you're saying, education, get everybody up to speed, do a better job. And they bypassed us in computer science. Number of PhDs graduated in 2005. Fastest. And then the other point.
By the way, doubled last year. So they produced twice as many PhDs in STEM than we do this year. And they're going to do that every year for the next, they say, decade.
So you better
think of that gap that they're going to have. It's huge.
So the way we get smart is leveraging computer technology. And if we look at your comments on government, you know, our government organization basically dates from the automobile industry in the 1950s when that evolved.
Yeah.
So big, deep layers. We need a much flatter story. We need to use the computational infrastructure to actually make it smarter. Because
I'm tearing up right now. I love this.
so you're right on money. I'll give you one detail on China as I engage with that some. We're lucky in that we have authoritarians on the other end, and they make mistakes because it's as much as one guy can do. Whereas you know, we're more distributed. And you know, Xi Jinping's brought in a whole Communist Party structure that's overseeing their professional civil service, and apparently you're making 30% of the policy decisions on a lot of mistakes, and that gets you a lot.
Yeah.
But essentially, these guys are going in a bad way for us, and we need to get organized.
Completely.
And the one thing that you didn't talk about, which I know you know a lot about, is the cyber issue. And what we need to do to get organized on that, because that's really central to our productivity, protecting our intellectual property and so forth. And I'll stop, I could go on for some more, I'd be happy to help out.
I could go on and on and on about cyber, but your foreheads would hit the table, I guarantee it. Because I get, my wife says I get my geek on when I talk about cyber. I've been doing that for the last 8 years, and quantum computing and how that's going to impact our ability to do encryption and other things. And we have to have it, and the government has to use it. Really important. And so I could go on and on. I will tell you that we do have some in corporate America still see that as the 1849 gold rush by operating in China. And they're willing to take really serious IP losses knowing, because it's a short-term gain, right? We beat on them, we say, if you don't make money in your first quarter, and I'm a free market guy. I passionately believe the free market's going to free more people and more Americans than any government program that we can produce. As a matter of fact, it took 650 million Chinese citizens and made them middle class by kind of using a free market approach. Right now they're cracking down. Right? Once you've made it, they don't want you to be too successful. Does this sound familiar here at home? I don't know, maybe a little. And so cyber is key. The next war will be a data war. We need to understand that. So I know some of the kids here, I hope you're not on TikTok. I know if you are, just look down at your shoes, don't worry about it. But the Chinese are collecting that data, and they make profiles on that data. Their algorithms, if you're Chinese and you go on Chinese TikTok and you punch it in, it sends their kids to technology questions and science. What does it do? What do their algorithms do for our people who are on it? And I say kids, everybody uses it, right? It sends them to cat dancing videos, and actually during the height of the the Black Lives Matter movement and the riots in the summer and all of that, they were also sending Americans to those things, trying to get people worked up about maybe we shouldn't like each other very much, right? It's very clever what they're doing, and we just kind of let it go. So data war is going to be absolutely critical. Keeping up technologically, and again, I agree with you. If the government the way it is today, and we continue to do this every year and borrow money every year, and we don't change the size, scope, and efficiency of government, we will lose. We will lose. That's why we're out rattling this bell. They are moving out. They said China couldn't compete with us in space. I don't know. 5 years ago, they said they're 20 years out. Guess what? They're now a peer competitor in what we're trying to accomplish in space. And that's both from a defense and economical and econ perspective, right? Remember they said, oh, they don't innovate. Chinese don't innovate. Their government doesn't allow them to innovate. Well, guess what? They stole some of our technology, repurposed it, and now they have hypersonic missiles that if you talk to anyone in the Pacific Fleet, they get a little bead of sweat on their breath, right? They're not waiting for us. Matter of fact, they're waiting for us to kill each other. They love it, because they get to keep focusing on where they're going and what they're doing now. And I'm no Communist Party fan, but having one person has its advantages, that I still think a democracy wins all day long as we understand that we are not enemies. We cannot look at, if you love your country, you have to love your countrymen, even if you passionately disagree with them. We've gotten away from that notion. Remember the Ronald Reagan, if 80% of my friend doesn't make the other 20% my enemy, right? It just means I'll take the 80%, we'll work on the rest. And he was very successful with that theory. He always used to say as well that I'll get up the next morning and try to go get that other 20% as well. And so we need to get back to that kind of politics instead of this, here's the other part of that. This one really bothers me. They just did a poll, only 39% of Americans would say that they're proud of their country. I've been to some bad places in the world. I brought some bad people back here to see what America's about. There is no place like the United States of America. I don't care for all our problems and all our opportunities that just don't happen. We have some friends that work at the ballets, I guess, right? The Four Seasons. We just got to know them. They're friends. They all came overseas and they thought, I don't understand why you Americans talk bad about yourself. He said, if I had this job back home, and he was from an African country, he said, I would have to pay somebody, or my uncle would have to own the place. And when I got the job, I'd have to pay a vig to everybody that helped me get this job every month. He said, you know how I got this job? I showed up, I told him I would work hard and I'll fall down if I have to. And he was very proud. Just the other day he was telling us, after 10 years in this country, I had saved up enough money to buy my own house. He said, I cannot do that where I come from. Why are we willing politically to walk away from that? And why are we willing to tell this generation that they won't have every opportunity that we had, only better, right? Because they can do it more efficient. They're smarter than we were. So let me rephrase it. He's an MIT professor. Smarter than I am. I mean, really, really powerful stuff. And we have to recollect ourselves a little bit, dust ourselves off. If we don't, I care for the country, which is why we're here, why we're rattling this stuff. Thank you for the question. Oh, Representative, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Congressman.
You see how us representatives get treated.
Yeah. So I'm going to take you to the other end of the spectrum on this. It seems to me like the barbarians are inside the tent. When we look at the fact that we had 51 Intel officials say that the Hunter Biden laptop was a Russian disinformation attempt, when we see the DOJ going after people who show up at school boards, when we see the DOJ and SWAT teams rolling up on anyone who have met the Trumps personally, it seems to me like we are in the banana republic phase of our democracy. And I'm curious, it seems to me, since that's the first fight we have to fight and win, how do we even start to engage that problem, that threat?
Yeah, it takes leadership. I do not disagree. Listen, I'm a big FBI guy. You know, we lost 2 agents.
And I'm not saying all the FBI.
No, this is
I'm talking about.
I get you. And so this is what's important. In that debate, I think everyone got painted. We just lost 2 FBI agents last year, kicking in the door, serving a warrant on a child pornography, and he opened fire and killed a boy. Right? It's dangerous work. When I was in Chicago, same kind of thing. And if there was a door to be kicked, I decided I wanted to be a part of it. I wanted to put bad guys in jail. Didn't even know, you know, where we were going, but I was excited to be there, right? You know, you're young and full of energy, right? And so we can't lose that part of it. I worked with a huge organized crime case that had public corruption as a part of it. Candidly, where the mob was actually in City Hall. This bothered me because I think it's a leadership culture problem at the Bureau. And I've said this publicly, I've said it to my friends, I'm still a proud member of the former Agents Association, and there's a lot of rumblings about we gotta fix this. But that just takes leadership. It takes, you gotta have the right folks in charge that understand the FBI, I might be one of those, how to clean out the 7th floor, and how to get them focused not on school boards, but the fentanyl distribution system that's killing 100,000 kids in our country. And in my mind, they swung and a missed on their public corruption side, and I would put some changes in that system that would not allow them to make the mistakes that they made. And some of that was Department of Justice, not FBI.
Are you assuming they were mistakes as opposed to an intentional undermining of everything we stand for?
Well, here's
you can tell where I'm coming from.
No, I gotcha. And listen, I've talked to these people, and the one that I had a lot of disagreement with one of them. I see the camera's still on, so I'll be
sorry.
careful. That's okay. I'm going to be really careful about this, but I will tell you, that person who I completely disagreed with, I thought he was passionately believed that if it weren't for him, you know, the Constitution would be in peril. He believed it. Now, you know, my argument is the FBI is a big, blunt instrument, right? And it's hard to beat it. If I get 10 agents or 18 agents or 20 agents saying, I'm gonna come get you, that is a big, blunt, scary instrument, and you have to be really judicious about it. They lost this respect for, you know, if you're gonna do that, you've gotta be more than right, right? I'd rather you err on the side of not doing it versus erring on the side of I'll take a chance. And there's a lot of fishing expeditions there that should have never happened, right? Because they just didn't have enough. And clearly, if they had an agent, back in my day, if an agent had falsified a document to get a FISA court warning, he would not just be fired, he would also have to spend a few days in jail. And my argument is you should have spent, matter of fact, you got his law lessons back. I think that's, what message are we sending to these agents, right? And so I think we have to protect what the institution of the FBI is. It is incredible. The men and women served are amazing. They're doing some great work. But we have to change this culture that you can use politics as a weapon for anything. And I'm going to do one other thing that is not going to be very popular. I worry about this constant cycle of investigation from investigative committees. Your team wins, I'm coming to get you. My team wins, you're coming to get me, or whatever, or vice versa. This is an endless cycle that is going to be very toxic to our political system. And I'm not saying accountability, that's important. But we need to be careful that we don't use these dog and pony show subpoena gathering events, like we just witnessed, candidly, on going after the other team, because this will never end. It will never end. And you have to ask yourself, okay, would you rather Congress spend their time on that? Or would you rather have Congress trying to figure out why we just lost $750 billion because government can't work right? I don't know about you, that's probably a better use of their time, and I don't care what party's in. And so I just think we've got to get our priorities right. I think we can fix it, but there would be some changes I would make both at the DOJ level and the FBI level, including cleaning out all the folks. They should know better. If you're tweeting anything political in the FBI, you should not be in the FBI. You know, you have choices. You don't have to be there. It should be absolutely non-partisan, non-political. And if I know what your political belief is as an FBI agent, you're doing something wrong.
Right. So would you advocate, though, for a serious, sober church committee like a relook at the DOJ and the Intel committee or community?
Well, I was disappointed with the letters too. They're allowed to have their opinion. It seemed odd to me that in the last 5 years, I didn't realize there were Republican generals and Democrat generals. honestly, but when I was in the Army, I didn't know that.
You know?
When I was in Congress, I really didn't know that. In the last few years, now you got Republican generals and Democrat generals. As I tried to tell a few general officers, friends of mine, and by the way, my brother is a retired general officer who would have never done this, you are painting the stars on your shoulder. Those aren't yours. They never were yours, right? They belong to the citizens of the United States. You need to stay out. You want to do that, that's something different. When they go on TV, I'm not talking about running for partisan office. You can absolutely go do that if you want to do that. But this notion that you're trying to influence policy by, getting up a whole bunch of people with stars on their shoulders saying one thing or another, I think is dangerous.
Yeah.
And that's why, if you notice, our numbers in support of the military has gone down. Keep your mouth shut. You know what I want the military to do? Is do what the military does. We have a friend that was 4-star general in the Marines, and he always said, yeah, you want us just going out and breaking stuff. Well, let's fix it. But our job is to go out and break stuff. Yeah, you know what? He's right. That's what we need to do.
Thank you.
Yeah. Was there a question back here in the corner now?
A number of the things that you've talked about here have to deal with bureaucratic obstacles.
Yeah.
And in Congress, I know you have met many of those.
Yeah.
There's a little joke that I tell my students that we'll never get rid of poverty as long as we have a government agency whose job it is to get rid of poverty.
That's so true.
Can
I borrow that line?
These bureaucratic obstacles, to me, seem far greater than the obstacles that we have dealing with foreign governments and so forth. What would be your plan to try to do this streamlining of government, which I've heard in my short life, pretty much every administration is coming in, going to make government work smoothly. We're going to make government smart. Every agency, every government, or every president's administration comes in here to do that. And I'd say the only person that I've ever heard of is one of New Hampshire's own, when Jerry Carmen was in charge of the GSA, who actually reduced the size of their budget, reduced the number of staff people. How do we do that?
Yeah, so this is the great, I think the great benefit of having the opportunity to get to understand the levers of government and how frustrating it can be, and how you do what you can do when you have the gavel. You try to do what you can do, and we did that. And then the last 8 years I've been spent basically in the high-tech business world. And you have to marry both. So here's what I would do. And I say this because I've watched this same story that you did. We're going to cut government. We're going to cut spending. We're going to make this. And of course, then every political antibody that's out there comes and tries and strangles you, right? Even if you're good-intentioned, well-intentioned. And so what I would do, I would create a commission in each department, and it would have to have a Democrat-leaning business person, and a Republican-leaning business person. And their job is not to report to the secretary. So the secretary has, or whatever the department head is, has a pretty tough job. And they're trying to, the tyranny of the inbox is at it, right? And then if you come in there and say, I'm going to cut half of you, the antibodies come out and you're dead, right? It never works. I've watched it happen again. As I say, we send out a lot of patrols, none of them come back, right? Something's not right. And so I would have that group report directly back into the White House and say, here's where you cut, here's what you do it. You go down to Congress and say, we're either going to do this or we're going to do it. But we're an easy way, we're all going to agree where we need to do this. And if we don't, we're going to have major problems down the road. Now, I think you can build a coalition. This is pretty hard for the Democrats to say that this Democrat-leaning business, and all we're asking them to do is add business efficiency to government. Because government's not a business. It will never, ever operate like a business. But you can get business efficiency out of the government. And if you can do that, now you've kind of gone around the antibodies. And then where do the antibodies go, right? And the secretaries being the secretary, they're doing what they're supposed to do every single day. And they're not the ones walking in going, you gotta go, and you gotta go, and you gotta go. Because candidly, they don't have that authority today. They don't even have that authority, which is a whole other set of problems. But I think this is the way you kind of get at it by going around it. And then you rally Americans around by saying, hey, listen, do you realize it takes 8 of you, 8, to pay for 1 federal employee inside the Beltway? How many think that that's about right? 8 of us? With all the problems we have? No, nobody's I worked on a car line, assembly line in Michigan. When I go back and tell them that it's 8 people, they grab wrenches in their hand. They're ready to go down to Washington, D.C. to do something because they work hard for their money. They don't want that money going from one person in the federal government. I think playing around what you're trying to do. You know, we're not trying to kill anyone, we're not trying, you know, it's okay if the government is smaller and more efficient. Really it is, let me tell you why, it'll benefit you. How many people love to go to the DMV a few years ago, before COVID, right? Now COVID came, it forced a lot of these DMVs to do what we've been telling them to do for 20 years. They had to modernize, right? They don't want you in their office, so they had to go online. Imagine if the government operated that way, holy mackerel, much better way. That's where I think you have to get creative how we do it, and we can't do it the same old way. One more.
And a follow-up question is slightly connected to that. Recently, I saw where they were wanted to have a lot more employees for IRS. I've always been of the opinion that with the process we have, almost everybody pays what they should. There's a large majority, probably 90%, it's all on Social Security, it's all on the tax. So
Yeah.
I was wondering what you thought about the recommendation of having more IRS employees.
A lot of really dumb ideas come out of Washington that had to rank right up there.
Glad we agree.
Oh my God, it's complete waste. Well, first of all, you know, our tax system is so complicated, right? We're terrified. We meet with our accountants every quarter because we're afraid that we're gonna do something wrong. Not that we are trying to do anything wrong. We're just afraid they're gonna find you didn't, you know, page 842 is, you know, that line is wrong. So we go through this fascination every year to try to make this thing work. And you know what? You don't hire 87,000 people to fix that problem if they don't think there's enough revenue coming in, right? You change the way we allow people to pay taxes in the United States of America. And by the way, if you know, I'm for a fair, flatter tax, honestly, it's less complicated. We can do that too if we really want to, but it's gonna take a little convincing of the American people, and somebody always thinks that somebody's getting away with murder if they make a little more money than you do and all of that. We gotta change all that. But those are conversations. But hiring 87,000 IRS agents that are gun carrying, badge wearing, is maybe the greatest admission that our tax system doesn't work. That's what I look at. If you have to do that, our tax system is not working. And by the way, it's supposed to work for us, rather than have some IRS agent kick in your front door and saying, you know, you missed a payment on whatever. Right, that to me, we've got the wrong sense of what government's supposed to do for you, not to you. And so I think we can change, you know, well, hopefully, the good news is the House has said that they would defund it. Hallelujah. $80 billion for what? And it makes no sense to me whatsoever. $80 billion. Yeah, yeah, we could use border agents. And my wife used to work for border, the Customs and Border Patrol. She'd like to see them go down there.
So just to build on that point in the FBI issues, I'm a fan of the FBI, and you might have noticed that they have 1,000 open cases on China, and so.
One every 10 hours.
You don't want to.
They open a new case every 10 hours.
You don't want to break government, because you've got the FBI chasing, doing counterintelligence work, you've got NSA defending you, you've got CIA doing it, and then DOD as well. And so, the people that hate the government the most, there's two groups. The Russians and the Chinese. And anytime any issue like this comes up, they're going to have bots trying to do influence all over it, trying to whip up as much as they can, cause as much trouble as possible. So you're still going to need to do the reform. And you know, back in 1994, when Gore was the vice president, they had this thing, the National Performance Review. They did 10 volumes of reports. It might be worth looking at that. You're going to need university people on this, because we don't actually know how to combine AI and computation to make an organization smarter. The business, you know, has gone a ways down this, but how do you do that and then put it together? And then there's advice from Admiral Studemans, a former NSA director and CIA director and deputy for a time. He says, if you want to get the government to do something new, you set up a new team to do it. And then as they spin up and become capable of doing it, you hand them more mission, and then you retire the old one. So this is, you know, how do you build the airplane while you're flying the airplane? Because you don't have time to have big disruptions. So just a few thoughts on that.
I love your thoughts. The only problem is, once a government program is there, good luck trying to get rid of that damn thing. I mean, it's just, what did Ronald Reagan say? The closest thing to eternal life is a government program. Yes, sir.
Just, what do you think the end game in Ukraine is? I mean, if we don't show them an exit,
Yeah.
what's the situation?
So, and I feel, you know, I've watched this on, you know, so I'm a chairman of the board of a company called MITRE Corporation. It's a not-for-profit public mission company. We help Department of Defense and intelligence hopefully ingest new, better ways to do things. They'll call us and say, hey, this is broke, you guys know how to fix it. It's really a really important gem in our national security infrastructure. And so we look at and track what's happening there. So I will tell you the mistake I thought was made is not going all in early, right? You wanted to set the table so it's so miserable that he has to get to the table early. And you think about the consequences of not doing that where they are today. 200 Ukrainians a day are giving their lives in this. We lost, at the height of the Vietnam War, 200 a week. Give you an idea of the difference. So they're paying a very heavy personal toll for this. Now they're fighting, they want to fight, they want to do it. But we're giving them enough not to lose. And I'm not talking about provoking and allowing them to go across the border into Russia. But what we needed to do early is set the table for negotiation. He's ready. I passionately believe he's ready. He understands he's got this problem. And some people would say, drive him out of Crimea. And listen, I'm for being as tough as anybody, and I'm no Putin fan. But I think there comes a time when the human toll and our long-term objectives get jumbled up here. And I would argue we're there. So I would use this opportunity to say, listen, you know, if you want to come have a conversation, do an immediate ceasefire. Because what he's doing, he's pulling out a Kherson. Everyone said, ooh, big victory. I have really bad nightmares about what's going to happen to Kherson in Ukraine. Sorry, it's a major city that they've been fighting over since the beginning of this thing. Putin has announced he's moving out. The Ukrainians are moving in, saying we're winning, we're winning, we're winning. You can see it on the news. I would be very cautious about what happens next. He will not hesitate to level that city. I don't know if he'd use a nuclear weapon, although he doesn't bluff. And when he told you he would use a tactical nuclear weapon, he's been saying that for 20 years. He believes a tactical nuclear weapon is part of his kit bag. You know, it's a weapon he can use on the battlefield. That's, you know, all of that is, we don't want that to happen. And so my argument is, if he's in a bad spot, now's the time to go talk. And then I would keep loading up with weapons. Like, guess what? This is only going to get worse for you. We're going to give them and these aren't our airplanes. We're going to give them, Germany wanted to give airplanes, and we said no. I still don't understand that. I think it was Poland wanted to put extra artillery pieces in there, and we said no. I'm like, what? If that's what they want, this is on their border. Right? Let them fight the way they need to fight. Anyway, I think the end game is going to be a negotiated settlement, but it may not look the way all of us, including me, would like. We may have to do like, well, we'll you know, we won't tell you to leave Crimea, but we're going to put a timeline on it. So this is not yours. We're not going to recognize it yours, but we're going to take 7 years. Because what happens is you can wait him out, and then you can position yourself. You can strengthen the Ukrainians up on those borders, and continue to put pressure on them. And then don't release any of, this is the way I do it if I can't forget. I would put all the pressure on sanctions, wouldn't take it away, and say every time you do something right, Mr. Putin will ease up, but you've got to perform. You absolutely have to do something. You know, that I hate to say it, the Biden administration loves to give things away and then hope for the best. You know, what is that old saying? You don't give the apple for the apple orchard. You know, you don't trade them. And so we got to be really careful we're not doing that. That's the way you continue to put pressure on him. He's under pressure at home. Good. I don't think he's going to lose his position anytime soon. And a lot of people are going to die in the meantime for us playing this long game out. I don't like it, honestly. And I don't think it's in our long-term national security.
So we have, I'm going to give you a little bit on schedule, so we've got time about 1 more.
Okay.
Want to go back to this issue of the social media platforms. I saw this report on 60 Minutes last weekend about how these tech giants are basically designing these platforms to incite divisiveness between people, because that's the way they gain more and more popularity, and especially TikTok, which of course is owned by the Chinese. You know, I learned on that program how their version is vastly different than what is in the United States. How do you fix those problems with these platforms without infringing on free speech and First Amendment?
This is the worst problem ever. So I actually just agreed to work with a company. It's a disinformation company. And what they try to do is figure out, are those real? Are they bots? And everybody would know what a bot is. It's basically it's a fake person that sends out information when bad guys talk to it, and then it sends it out. It looks like a person is, tearing you up. Unfortunately, we're going to see more and more and more of this in politics in America. It's coming, and it's not good. So this company's trying to get ahead of it. I think that through these private companies, we can start to move the government to get to a better place. And really what it is, I do believe transparency is the best cleaner, right? If you can identify it, let people know, start telling people, whoop, that's a bot network, don't pay attention to that, is probably the best, quickest way to do it. And then we're not infringing on anyone's rights. Because what happens is the first time you make a mistake and you say, oop, that's a bad network, and that's really, Bob, your neighbor, who just doesn't like it. Then you got other problems. And so I think that's the way I do it. I would have these massive, transparent disinformation, or companies or the government probably should play some role in this, especially on the international front, and just start telling people. We have to educate people. I mean, think of the things that your kids have told you, or your neighbors have told you they've seen on TikTok because they know it's true, right? I mean, what's that old famous quote that Abraham Lincoln said? Don't believe everything you read on the internet. Thanks for getting that. I appreciate it. This is my tech joke that my wife hates when I tell that joke. And so that's the way I think you have to come at it. I really do. I just don't see any other way to get at it soon. So think about this. That disinformation company I was telling you about is the one that Elon Musk called and said, are all of those customers that these advertisers are paying, are they real? Yeah, on Twitter, sorry. And they came back and said, nope. Maybe 15% are not real. So think about it, if you're an advertiser and you're paying for 100 people and you're only getting 85, somebody's getting ripped off, right? And that's why that created that big stir around that whole thing. These guys are really good. It's Israeli technology, really, really good. And I just think that kind of a company is what's going to have to get us back in the game. And it's, again, transparency. We are going to have to be responsible for what we read and interpret and understand. Is that real? Or is somebody trying to get me to do something I probably wouldn't normally do? Last one, she just asked the question. I apologize, I missed her. I don't want to get in trouble.
Sure, go for it.
Yeah?
All right, well, I'll be brief. I'm concerned about, and I don't know the extent to which this is happening, but hearing that the Chinese are buying up farmland across America, that is terrifying to me, and yet, what do we do about that?
Yeah. The only good news about that is they can't take it with them.
Yeah.
Right? So they can do other things. And so they've also been buying water rights,
Yeah.
Agricultural production. By the way, Hollywood is, half the money washing around in Hollywood movies today is Chinese money.
I know.
And they, by the way, they're very subtly marketing to people about China and Communist Party. Matter of fact, they never use the word Communist Party ever, right? They're just trying to get a whole generation of Americans to buy into their propaganda. All of that's concerning, so we are doing more on investments in critical things up front. So the military stuff that you could imagine that we need to defend ourselves, that's getting much better. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Yeah.
It's getting much, much better. And then this next level of what should we allow them to buy? I argue food is a security issue.
Right.
We can't feed ourselves, we got trouble. I'm not sure I want a foreign government owning any capability we have to produce food. I just don't want it. I mean, what if they go out and say we're not growing anything for the next 5 years, right? Because I want to drive up commodity prices on corn or rice or whatever. I worry about that. And by the way, they've shown us that they're willing to flip on and off these switches, right? We watched them do it. And so you just can't let them go. I argue that we ought to have a review of all of it. And listen, here's the thing. And so everybody says, wow, you're anti-China. I am not anti-China. I'm not anti-Chinese. I am anti-Communist Party of China. They're the ones that are doing bad things to us, number one. And number two, they're not doing it for good purposes, right? They know that they're trying to push us out. And so they're trying to get us to not, to talk to each other in a way that says, no, you can't be tough on China because that, you know, that's fill in the blank. Everybody has 5 terms they'll call you if you say be tough on China. We can't fall for that.
But if we have politicians pay to play, so I agree with you. I don't want us to have our elected officials spending all this time investigating, but I'm also very concerned with the number of politicians that enter office at one level, and a few years later, they're like worth $100 million. How does that happen? And are they preventing us from making better decisions about China and Russia, et cetera?
Yeah, well, listen, I have always believed that there are some politicians that if you talk to them long enough, you'll know you probably ought not to be voting for them, right? And that's our system. And some of them are gonna do things we don't agree with, and some of the things they're gonna do things that look awful gray and unethical to me. You're gonna have that. There's 500 people in Washington DC, right? Somebody gets elected, isn't it gonna be right? When I first got elected, I couldn't believe it. I'm my youngest of 5 boys. My dad was a teacher. My mom ran the little local chamber of commerce. I get elected to Congress, and I'm thinking, oh my God, this is the place where Madison walked and Lincoln had a desk. I mean, unbelievable, right? How in the heck did I get it? So I go in and I go, I can't believe how I got here. I kept waiting for somebody to tap me on the shoulder and say, wrong building. But then about 6 months later, I started looking around going, how the heck did all of them get here? So I appreciate your concern, and I just think that's why we have to invest ourselves in time and energy in politics, and to make sure that we're putting the right people there. And then, listen, good leadership. We have to break out of these paradigms that we've caught ourselves in election after election after election. We talk about the same things. We talk about the same thing. Think about it. How many times have we talked about an infrastructure bill that saves America? Republicans, Democrats, we've all done it. We are in bad shape, right? Why? Something's not working. So we just need to get invested and get involved and really make candidates accountable for those kinds of things. Do you think that they have the courage to stand up to a system that is going to be very unfriendly to change? And there's going to be corporate Americans who believe that we should be much nicer to the Chinese Communist Party because they make money, right? I think we got to have courage to say, no, guess what? Nope, not this go round. Right?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. I really appreciate it. Oh, my gosh. Hey, Neil, thank you so much. Thanks for lowering your standards.